Welcome to Gonzaga School of Law. My name is Ashley. I am the president of the GSA Outlaws here. Our speaker today is a former major who spent 20 years with the Air Force, both active duty and reserve. During her 20-year career as a nurse in the Air Force, she served in the Persian Gulf, received many medals and commendations. Since leaving the service, she has received her doctorate from Temple University and is currently a physical therapist at the VA hospital here in Spokane. She also shares her personal experience of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. She dealt with this former policy firsthand during her time. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce retired Major Margaret Witt.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Gonzaga Law, GSA Outlaws, ACLU, and the Armed Forces Club. Wow, that's fantastic you have that many organizations. It's really my honor to be here this evening, especially since it's such a big night. You know, we've been waiting for that VP debate. So be honest, how many people are recording it? And how many people are waiting for Saturday Night Live version, which is far more entertaining? Okay. How many law students do we have this evening? Fantastic. There are many heroes of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But my heroes are my legal team. When something like this happens to you and you've got such a big organization you want to fight, there's not many folks that you can turn to for help. And I actually was so fortunate. A friend of mine who was my neighbor actually was an ACLU member, and made a phone call and found, happened to have worked with Jim Loebsenz, who happened to have fought the Perry Watkins case 20 years before, if you've heard about that. And he happened to bring on the ACLU. So I thank you for the career path you've chosen in being that person that somebody like me so desperately needs to turn to for help. So thank you for what you're doing. It certainly is an interesting time that we're living in right now. I can remember when I was growing up in elementary school, we used to play this game, and you probably are all too young for it. Smear the queer. Anybody ever heard that term? Whoever had the ball, you just tackled them. And I came home, you know, my favorite recess game is Smear the Queer. And my mom and dad were just, that's not very nice. So, you know, I did what they're always telling me to do, go look it up, because I had no idea what I'd said. So at the time I went and looked it up in Webster's dictionary, which I'm sure their version was many years before me. The only definition I could find was different. I thought, what's wrong with that? But I'm sure that definition has changed. I haven't looked it up recently. But it's such an amazing time that we're living in. I mean, we're all over the media. I'm here with you tonight. Our governor has and our legislation has put forth the marriage proposal, and we're going to be voting on that. Make sure you vote. And we have a president that backs us all the way. Today's National Coming Out Day. Now it's like our own little holiday. And it certainly is a holiday that I never thought that I would be able to partake in. I joined the Air Force back in 1987. And this is before Colonel Greta Kammermeyer even came out. Okay, nobody knows. Google Colonel Greta Kammermeyer. You got it. Serving in Silence, the movie? No, still before you? Okay. I was an operating room nurse, and I joined the Air Force because I could do the same job that I was doing at Tacoma General Hospital, where I was born, but I could serve my country and I could have a greater purpose. And of course, there was that perk of I could see the world. Don't Ask, Don't Tell didn't come along until 1993. By that time, I was on my third assignment. I had been an operating room nurse in California. I had the pleasure of being in Germany in Wiesbaden Hospital after that, and that was actually the first Gulf War. Happened while I was stationed there. And after that, in 1993, by that time I was a flight nurse, and I was serving just outside of St. Louis. I served another 10 years after Don't Ask, Don't Tell came into effect, and the whole time I thought I was doing my job. I thought, I'm not going to tell, and certainly no one's going to ask me because that's their part of the deal. But what I didn't realize was that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a complete misnomer. In 2003, when I was serving in my reserve unit over in Tacoma, I had my commander come to my door one day, and she said, "Major Witt?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "Come with me. There's somebody that's," actually she didn't say anything at first, and so I was just walking by her side down the hall, and I looked at her and I said, "You're making me a little nervous here. What's going on?" And she said, "Oh, somebody's just doing kind of an investigation, and they just want to ask you a few questions." Well, there had been somebody in the unit that was having a few problems, and I thought, well, I don't know anything about that, so ask me all you want. Good. So she opened the door of the commander's conference room, and she scooted me in and said, "This is Major Torm. He's a JAG officer. He'll be just, asking you a few questions." And I said, "Okay." And she just scooted me in, closed the door, and left. And we sat down, and it was interesting to me because Major Torm was a JAG officer, and he kind of prefaced what he had to say to me. And he said, I'm obligated to be here, and I need to ask these questions, but you are an Air Force officer, and I want you to behave like an Air Force officer and think about what you're going to say and do." And I thought, I'm still okay. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that." And then the next thing out of his mouth, he says, "What's your relationship with so-and-so?" And that was the first inkling that this whole thing was about me. Here I had thought I had done my job. But it turns out the whole misnomer part is not only can I not tell and somebody can't ask me, but you can never tell anyone in your entire life. With Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a third party, all they had to do was make a phone call. So if they found that credible, and when they're, when it's your ex-partner, that becomes a little credible. So he put a piece of paper in front of me, because I told him, I said, at that time it was true. I said, "She's my roommate." And so he puts the piece of paper in front of me, and again he tells me, "You're an Air Force officer." I'm thinking, okay, he really wants me to think about this. So you can see the Air Force, is really keen on this whole policy to begin with. And he says, "You can sign this piece of paper admitting homosexual conduct, and you'll be discharged in 2 weeks." And I thought, I've never seen the military do anything in 2 weeks. But turns out it's true. It's that fast. And I wondered, and I didn't know the statistics at the time, but there was almost 14,000 people discharged just under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so many more before that. And I wondered why I had never known of anyone. And I realized why. Because even that day when he came in and told me that I basically was under investigation, and I didn't sign that piece of paper. And that's when I made that phone call to my neighbor. I didn't sign that piece of paper, so I knew I was under investigation, but he also said, "You're still under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. There's only 2 people in this squadron that know I'm even here and why I'm here. You cannot tell a soul that we've had this conversation." Okay. So I had to continue to go back to my unit and serve my duty, knowing that I was under investigation and I would probably be gone sooner than later. And that was in July, I think, of 2003. So I went back and went back. And then in November, I was there doing my reserve duty again, and the acting commander came to my door and said, "Major Witt." And I said, "Oh, God." And I said, "No." And she said, "Yeah, Margie, come on." And she walked me down the hall to that same conference room. And she had must have been a witness of sorts, another Air Force officer, were in the room, and she told me it was the most difficult thing she'd ever had to do in her career, but she said I needed to pack all my things and I needed to leave the base. And I'm still under investigation. So I have to pack whatever. I have this whole office because I'm like in charge of this, all the standards and evaluations for a big inspection coming up. I'm thinking, huh, you just screwed yourself. But I grabbed an envelope and I realized as I'm walking out the door, this is it. And I still can't tell anybody why. And I can't thank anybody. This unit had become my family. And I walked out the door. And I honestly can't tell you what I did after that. I know I got home somehow, back here. So I went home. I do remember when I got home, I closed all my blinds because I'd heard horror stories of investigations in the past. I went right out and I bought phones that were connected to the wall instead of portable phones, you know, waiting to hear that click, 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 watching out the window to see if they had people watching me. And it took, like, somehow in that next year or so or whatever, they lost my paperwork. But to jump forward a bit, I mean, I got my law team. I had people willing to help me, but then we had to wait for the military to come back and actually say, we are proceeding with the discharge. So that took until 2006. So every day I'd go home trying to beat the mailman and wait for that letter, because for some reason I couldn't bring myself to think, I've got to come home and get that little stupid little white sticky off the door and go to the post office and face somebody to pick it up. So I wanted to beat the mailman home. And I remember when he brought it and he handed it to me and he said, I hope it's something good. I just remembered that. And I just looked at him and I said, oh, you have no idea. But you know, that made it very real. And it was at that point that we could actually file the lawsuit. So that April, we filed the lawsuit in the federal district court in Tacoma. And I ended up there, I think the end of June that year, in front of Judge Layton. So it is a little weird for me to be on this side and not on that side, just so you know. We went, he was very respectful, but we lost. Took him a lot of months to decide. And I looked to my legal counsel and he says, He loves baseball. He loves baseball. Everything was baseball. And I used to get the there's no crying in baseball too. And he said, we're only in the second inning. Of course, I have no experience with the whole legal process, but boy was he right. We were only in the second inning. So after that experience, then the Air Force, I had to go for a formal hearing. At the end of September, I had to go down to Georgia, supposedly before a board of my peers. There were, I can't remember, there were 3 or 4. I think there were 3 male colonels from the South sitting across from me for 2 days. And the judge. And pretty much just as they said, you know, there's really no fighting the policy, which actually is law, because there's a lot of fine print. And I don't begin to understand all the legalities. But I was formally discharged 2007 from that proceeding. And I didn't even find that out until all of a sudden I didn't have dental insurance one day. I had to call my unit and say, what happened? Well, you've been discharged. So that was 2007, but wait a minute, I got my years mixed up. 2004, 2006, I think we went to 9th District. I think I'm off by a couple of years with the Federal District Court. And then we went up to the 9th District, and that was in November. And we actually won. And then the Justice Department appealed that en banc, and I had to learn what all that was. And we still won, and it established what my friends laugh at is the Witt standard. Because the whole point of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the whole rationale behind it was that all gays and lesbians affected unit cohesion and morale in a negative way, period. And what the Ninth Circuit says was directly just about me. Well, you have to prove that. You have to prove she did. So you have to meet that standard. And it's my understanding that they used that even in the log cabin case in California, because that started about the same time that mine did. And I apologize for getting those dates wrong. I should know those by now. I was a brunette before it started. So that was decided in 2008. But I guess we were only in like the 6th inning, because then we had to wait to see what they were going to do with that. Of course, you know, they appealed, so we have to wait and figure out whether it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Well, it goes up, you know, to the White House and the Pentagon, DOJ, and they decide, you know, this case hasn't really been decided yet on that standard, so we're going to send it back down to the district court in Tacoma. So in September of 2010, I went back to the same district court in front of the same judge, Judge Layton, Republican appointee of Bush, and I sat in court on that side for almost 2 weeks, like a criminal. It's a real surreal experience to go from just wanting to help somebody and do your job to being thought of as almost like a criminal. But it was probably the most amazing 2 weeks of my life. Day after day, and this is where a lot of credit goes to my unit members. Day after day, it was like, this is your life. Person after person came through that door to take the stand that had served with me. And it was very humbling. And the DOJ put up one witness, which was the 3-star general in charge of the Air Force Reserve who had never met anyone that was gay, never done any discharges, never looked at my record, didn't have any family members. And actually my attorney actually introduced me from, this is Major Witt, so like now he's met one. And I wanted a toaster oven, but I didn't get one. So they really didn't have anything, and that was the whole point. That was the ridiculousness of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, was this presumption that we would affect unit cohesion and morale in a negative way. We just wanted to be like anybody else and do our job. We wanted to serve our country. I was there to help those that were putting it all on the line. That's all I ever wanted to do. So it was really a disservice to so many for so many decades to be treated that way. We won that battle. We won that case. We won my case. We won the battle. Repeal happened a year ago. I just went back to a celebration in New York to celebrate the 1-year anniversary, and actually the guest of honor was the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mike Mullen. And it was really something to see he and his wife there, celebrating with us a year later. And the military has come out with their own studies now that, wow, big surprise, everything's going smoothly. Nobody came to work in a rainbow flag. So it was nice to celebrate. We've won that battle, but we haven't won the war, because every step, obviously every step counts. But now we're allowed to serve and serve openly and with honor, but we're not recognized for our commitment to another person, a family. And that is, the next thing they always say, oh, they'll want more. Oh, you mean like being human? Yeah. We just want to be human. We want to be recognized for having those same connections, those same commitments, having family, being respected for making those same sacrifices and the same commitments to our country, our community. When I think of I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had a staff sergeant who was a female who was killed in action and was legally married to her same-sex partner. And I just think of the heartbreak. Who got that call? Did she get that call? Was she able to be there to meet that casket? Does she have kids at home? Will they be provided for? No. That's a small thing that our country gives to those who are left back home. And we're asking for that same respect for the sacrifices that we make. So, marriage is a big deal. DOMA's a big deal. I'm happy that the president's behind us. And that is the next battle toward winning the war. That's my story. Did I leave anything out? You probably know more about the legal cases than I do. I'm sure you do.